So can you tell us your name and what your profession is?
Feel like I'm back in school. So my name is Daniel G. I am a partner in the sports team at Sheridan's.
And tell me, Daniel, what is important about the role that you do?
I think ultimately my specific role is I try and help families, players, and agents on the whole navigate the life that is football contracts and football issues. And so I would say sometimes I'm the proactive person that can look through a contract and try and distill some of those quite difficult concepts a bit more in a straightforward manner. And sometimes I'm the guy that needs to deal with difficult situations when they arise. So sometimes there's a mix between proactive and reactive stuff.
Okay. And in terms of those myths, what one myth do you think that parents and young players can often get wrong when they think about football contracts?
Well, I think there's lots. One of the things is the myth that all agents are just in it for themselves. Um, there's obviously a whole range of different agents and agencies, but I'm lucky enough to work with some of the best in the business, I would say. And I would say without fail, the best agents are 100% looking out for the interests of their player and the families in that order, and everything else is secondary. After that, in terms of contracts, we can go into some greater detail about what an appearance might mean, what a tax gross-up clause might be, what issues there are around termination or disciplinary issues. But I would say the primary focus a lot of the time is sometimes families and players feel like they need to, whichever agent or agency approaches them first, that might be for them. But a lot of the time, which is the great job you're doing, Marcia, is to try and explain to them and try and have conversations with a lot of people to get the best feel and to get the best fit.
And how do they do that? What sort of questions and things should families be looking out for when finding an agent?
Well, I think there's a whole mix. Whenever I'm sort of recommending people to families and players, I won't just recommend one person or one agency, because there will always be a synergy, a feeling, the building of a relationship, which is important. I think it's also important to sort of stress that a lot of families and players will want to see that an agent has a track record of doing deals. I think a lot of the time it's easy to say you're doing great things, but it's another thing to have relationships with clubs, to be able to know how to do a negotiation, to be able to understand how the football industry works can be very important. So I would say is to be very considered when it comes to choosing an agent or your first agent, because more or less you're in it for 2 years. That's the extent of the relationship, and hopefully things go well. Or you might want to have a shorter deal. You might want to try the agent out for a particular period of time. And I think that's when sometimes the lack of information can be had, which is go and speak to a lot of people, go and see if the fit works, and then go from there.
And Daniel, in the work that you do, you work for players and for clubs as well, and for agents. In a contract negotiation, can you represent all three?
Me personally, no. So I have an obligation to my client, whoever then my client might be. Almost always it is the player. So I will be reporting back to the player and his or her inner circle as to what the contract looks like, in my experience, what things we should negotiate on. I'm going to be less the guy that is saying it's X amount of thousands of pounds a week and it's X amount of bonus, because those are the things that the agent will be negotiating. But I will be looking out for the small print to say, well, if this happens, then you don't get your money. Or if you don't make these amount of appearances, then this doesn't happen. So as much as I'm the pernickety person, I'm the one that will try and look out for the detail and explain that detail as necessary.
Great. And what if a family doesn't have an agent? Can they go directly to a law firm like you?
Well, yeah, this is when the FA and FIFA rules have changed in different ways now. So a player can self-represent them, so represent themselves, but it's not ideal for lots of different reasons, mainly because they have to be the ones in the room negotiating with seasoned professionals that have done that day in, day out. The other thing also is that if it's a player self-representing, or if it's just a player in their family, if they're going to be negotiating, and if someone's going to be negotiating on the player's behalf, they do need to be registered as an agent. And as we've talked about before, then you have to pass an exam and register and do all of that. The other thing about whether you need an agent or not generally is sometimes it can be, I wouldn't say all the time, more straightforward to renegotiate a deal at the club you're at. But a lot of the time, to understand the player's value at the club, you need to understand what's out there in the market. And to understand what's out there in the market, you need probably seasoned agents that have relationships with the chief executives, the sporting directors, the technical directors, the chairman of a range of clubs, to know whether the market is larger than they think, and whether actually the right option for the player might be to stay, but to push for a bigger package, or to actually go because there's more value out in the market.
And does that mean that the bigger agents that have all these connections are always the best?
No, not necessarily. It simply, I think, depends a lot on the personality match. It depends how you define best, actually, as well. If you're saying, is best the agent that gets the deal done but doesn't mind ruffling feathers and destroying relationships, some people would say, well, that's fine because that's ultimately in the best interest of the player. But a lot of the time, as everybody knows in any industry, to have longevity, you need to build relationships. You need to compromise. You need to be able to understand what the other person wants. And of course, there are going to be terse moments and arguments and difficulties. But a lot of the time, I would say the best people at the clubs and the best agents are the ones that see through situations, find solutions to stuff. And a lot of the time it's because they've been there and done it before, so can look around the corner and foresee the problem before it actually and potentially arises.
Great. So Dan, I'm going to fire some words at you and tell me what they mean. Image rights.
Complicated but worthwhile. Is that a good enough answer?
Fine. Compensation.
What for? Training
Training compensation.
Yeah, so complicated as well, redone deal.
Redone deal, I love that one. Small print.
My expertise.
Boot deals.
Great, but there needs to be firstly a real value, understand the value of that boot deal, and secondly, watch out for the restrictions outside of the boot deal, i.e., can you wear Louis Vuitton? Can you endorse a sunglasses brand? Does that mean fragrances are out? Does it mean electronics can't be used? So maybe back to the original one, which is small print. Boot deals can be great for the glamour and the prestige of being associated with a great brand, but it's important to understand what the player is going to be restricted from too. That's definitely a longer answer than I expected.
How can we make accessing contract advice from a sports lawyer affordable?
The short answer is I have a specific approach to working with families that are going to be entering into scholarship agreements and then first pros. So it's on a very bespoke basis that I will do those type of deals and help those families, knowing that hopefully the idea is to build, like we've talked about before, those long-term relationships. So it ultimately will depend on the value of those contracts that I will obviously see. But ultimately, my aim is to try and help safeguard the player's future from that first deal, and hope in the same way that he or she will want to then build that trusting relationship with me in the longer term.
Okay. And just working with families, where have you seen it go wrong?
Well, the short answer is, and it's always the same, is money. And that's because a lot of the time there can be significant pressure put on a relatively young person that's carrying the hopes and dreams of a family on his or her shoulders. And that can come into money for whether a family member becomes an agent and then the commission that's due, whether suddenly the player receives a lot of money and then a lot of family feel that either they're obliged or feel that they deserve or need money for lots of different reasons, as you can imagine. So I think what's always really important from a family perspective is communication as to working out what's actually firstly in the best interests of the player for him or her, and then working backwards from there. Because families, all families have their quirks, and their ups and downs especially. But a player being in the limelight mixed with the adulation and the lows that can come from that, mixed with the glamour, the seductive glamour sometimes, and the short and long term money that can come from it, is a difficult mix sometimes to navigate.
Sure. Daniel, contract law and this whole area of the football business can be quite overwhelming for families that have never been on this road before. How can you make it less scary?
Well, firstly, by doing videos like this, so thank you. Um, I would say, like we always talk about with Number One Club, it is an education piece. It's reading books, if it's mine or others, about actually how transfers work or how contracts are actually in some detail. There are a lot more resources out there on the internet, especially your platform, which is fantastic for that already. But I think, like anyone, and I know it sometimes might feel intimidating, my email is quite easily accessible online. People get in touch with me all the time and just ask for 20 minutes here or there just to say, can we grab a coffee? And can I tell you about the situation I'm in and how do you think you can help? So I try and just be actually as accessible and as specific as that, which is if someone needs a bit of a hand, hopefully I'm there, or one of my team's there to be able to help.
Amazing. So I'm going to end on two final things. What are your